If someone was in a harmful situation, wouldn't they just speak up or ask for help? That's what most people believe, and honestly, it sounds logical at first. If something feels wrong, you say something, you leave, you reach out. That's how we imagine it working. But the reality is much more complicated than that, because when you're not the one inside the situation, it's easy to think clearly. It's easy to see the solution. But when you are inside it, when you are experiencing it in real time, everything feels different. Your thoughts aren't as clear. Your emotions are involved. And what looks simple from the outside can feel incredibly difficult, confusing, and even impossible from the inside. The truth is, silence is not something that just happens randomly. It builds over time. It is shaped by experiences, emotions, and the environment around a person. People don't just wake up one day and decide not to speak. Instead, they slowly adapt to what they are experiencing. They adjust. They try to make sense of things. And as the situation becomes more complex, their ability to respond becomes more limited. Silence becomes a response, not a choice. It becomes a way to cope, a way to stay stable in a situation that feels uncertain or overwhelming. One of the strongest forces behind silence is fear. And this fear is not always loud or obvious. It doesn't always come in the form of direct threats. Sometimes it is quiet, it builds slowly, it shows up in the form of uncertainty about what might happen next. Someone might think about the consequences of speaking up. They might worry about losing the small sense of stability they still have. They might fear making things worse instead of better. And when that fear is present every day, even in small ways, it begins to influence decisions. It begins to shape behavior. And eventually, it becomes strong enough to keep someone silent without needing to be spoken out loud. Another powerful factor is manipulation, and this is where things become even more difficult to recognize. Manipulation doesn't usually start in a negative way. In fact, it often starts with something that feels positive. Someone shows care, support, or understanding. They listen, they connect, they build trust, and that trust creates a sense of comfort. But over time, that same trust can be used to influence decisions. The person may begin to question themselves. They may feel unsure about what is right or wrong. They may start relying more on the other person's perspective instead of their own. And when someone loses confidence in their own judgment, speaking up becomes much harder because they are no longer fully sure of what they believe. There is also the role of isolation, which can quietly reshape how someone sees their situation. When a person becomes disconnected from friends, family, or anyone they trust, they lose access to outside perspectives. There is no one to reflect back what is happening, no one to say that doesn't sound right. Without that external input, the situation begins to feel normal, even if it isn't. And when something feels normal, it becomes harder to question it. Isolation doesn't just remove support, it changes perception. It narrows the way someone sees their world. Another major factor is dependence, and this can take many forms. Sometimes it is practical, like relying on someone for stability, resources, or daily needs. Other times it is emotional, like feeling connected, attached, or obligated to someone. When a person feels like they depend on someone else, speaking up can feel like risking everything at once. It's not just about leaving a situation, it's about stepping into uncertainty. And when the future feels unclear, staying can feel safer than taking that risk, even if the situation is not healthy. There is also a deep layer of emotional pressure that can develop over time. People may feel guilt, responsibility, or even loyalty. They may think about how their actions could affect others. They may feel like they owe something or that speaking up would create conflict or harm. These emotional connections can be incredibly strong, especially when they are built slowly through trust and interaction. Even when something feels off, those emotions can make it difficult to act. Because leaving or speaking up doesn't just feel like a decision, it feels like breaking something important. Another reason silence happens is because people don't always recognize the situation for what it is right away. These situations rarely begin with something clearly negative. They often start with something that feels normal, helpful, or even positive. Over time, small changes begin to happen. The tone shifts, expectations change, control increases. But because these changes are gradual, they are harder to notice. There is no single moment where everything suddenly feels wrong. Instead, it slowly becomes something different. And by the time it is recognized, the situation may already feel complicated and difficult to leave. There is also the challenge of uncertainty, which can be one of the biggest barriers to speaking up. Not knowing what will happen next can stop someone from taking action. They may question whether they will be believed. They may wonder if speaking up will actually help or make things worse. They may not know where to go or who to trust. And when there are more questions than answers, hesitation becomes natural. People often choose what feels safer in the moment, even if it means staying silent. This is why awareness is so important. Instead of asking, why didn't they speak up? We need to start asking a different question. What made it so difficult for them to speak? Because when we shift that perspective, we begin to understand that silence is not about weakness. It is about navigating a situation that feels controlled, uncertain, and overwhelming. We're here to raise awareness on sex trafficking. Your voice matters. Join us.